What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actresses comes face to face with a host who's completely lost his way? You won't believe what unfolds when Jennifer Lawrence sits down for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview, only to find herself in the crosshairs of Stephen Colbert's increasingly erratic behavior. This isn't just another celebrity dust-up. This is the moment that exposed the dark side of late-night television and left an entire studio audience in stunned silence. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two collide in the most explosive late-night confrontation we've ever witnessed. The tension was palpable from the moment Jennifer Lawrence stepped onto the Ed Sullivan Theater stage. What should have been a celebratory appearance to promote her latest film quickly transformed into something far more sinister. As she walked toward Colbert's desk with her trademark smile, something in the host's demeanor immediately felt off. His usual theatrical warmth was replaced by a cold, calculating stare that seemed to strip away the veneer of late-night entertainment. Hospitality. "Jennifer Lawrence, everybody," Colbert announced to the audience, but his tone carried an edge that veteran viewers had never heard before. As the applause died down and Lawrence settled into the guest chair, Colbert leaned back with an unsettling smirk that suggested he had an agenda far beyond promoting her upcoming project. "So, Jennifer," Colbert began, his voice dripping with false congeniality, "I have to ask about something that's been bothering me." Lawrence's expression immediately shifted from relaxed promotional mode to cautious awareness. She had done hundreds of these interviews, and she knew when a host was about to go off script in a dangerous way. "I'm sorry, what exactly has been bothering you, Stephen?" she responded, her voice steady but her body language betraying the first signs of discomfort. The studio lights seemed harsher somehow, and the normally supportive audience energy felt strangely charged with anticipation. Colbert's next words would set the stage for what entertainment insiders are already calling the most shocking late-night moment in television history. "Well, I've been reading some interesting things about your, shall we call them, political transformations over the years. It seems like you've become quite the Hollywood hypocrite, haven't you?" The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Lawrence's face flushed, not with embarrassment, but with the kind of righteous anger that comes from being blindsided by someone who was supposed to be an ally. The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing that something had gone terribly wrong with what was supposed to be light entertainment. "Excuse me," Lawrence shot back, her famous wit now sharpened into a defensive weapon. "I'm here to talk about my film, Stephen. I'm not sure what game you're trying to play here, but I'm not interested in participating." But Colbert wasn't backing down. In fact, he seemed energized by her resistance, leaning forward with the predatory enthusiasm of someone who had found his prey cornered. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every uncomfortable second of what was rapidly becoming a career-defining moment for both stars. The confrontation had only just begun, and already the atmosphere in the studio had shifted from celebratory to combative. What happened next would leave everyone wondering how far a host could push before crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Colbert's eyes gleamed with malicious satisfaction as he doubled down on his attack. "Come on, Jennifer. You can't sit there and pretend you haven't flip-flopped on every major issue for the sake of your career. First you're the relatable girl from Kentucky, then you're lecturing us about climate change while flying private jets around the world. Which version of Jennifer Lawrence are we getting today?" The audience gasped audibly. This wasn't the playful ribbing that late-night television was known for. This was a calculated character assassination happening in real time. Lawrence's hands gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles whitening as she processed the unprecedented hostility coming from someone she had considered a professional colleague. "You know what, Stephen?" Lawrence's voice rose, her Kentucky accent becoming more pronounced as her anger mounted. "I came here as a courtesy, to promote a film that employs hundreds of people, and instead you want to play gotcha journalism? This is pathetic, even for you." But Colbert wasn't finished. He pulled out a stack of printed articles from beneath his desk, waving them theatrically for the cameras. "Oh, but I'm just getting started. Should we talk about your wage gap activism while you were reportedly one of the highest-paid actresses in Hollywood? Or maybe we should discuss your environmental activism while your production company has one of the largest carbon footprints in the industry?" The studio audience was now completely silent, torn between loyalty to their beloved host and shock at his unprofessional behavior. Some audience members could be seen shifting uncomfortably in their seats, while others pulled out their phones to record this unprecedented meltdown. Lawrence stood up abruptly, her chair rolling backward with the force of her movement. "Are you kidding me right now? You ambush me on your show with a folder full of tabloid nonsense, and you think that's journalism? This is exactly what's wrong with media today. You're more interested in creating drama than having real conversations." "Sit down, Jennifer," Colbert commanded, his mask of television civility completely slipping away. "We're not done here. The audience deserves to know who you really are behind all that manufactured authenticity." "I don't take orders from you," Lawrence fired back, her voice echoing through the stunned studio. "And I certainly don't owe you or anyone else an explanation for how I choose to live my life or use my platform." The tension in the room was suffocating. Production assistants could be seen whispering frantically into headsets, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue. Colbert's band sat frozen, their instruments silent as they watched their usually composed host spiral into something unrecognizable. "You know what your problem is?" Colbert continued, completely ignoring the chaos around him. "You can't handle being called out. You're so used to softball interviews and yes-men telling you how wonderful you are that you can't cope when someone actually challenges your hypocrisy." Lawrence's face was now flushed with rage and humiliation. The actress who had charmed millions with her down-to-earth personality was being systematically torn apart on national television by someone who was supposed to be on her side. But what Colbert said next would push this confrontation into territory that nobody could have predicted. "You want to know what really bothers me about you, Jennifer?" Colbert's voice dropped to a venomous whisper that somehow carried throughout the entire studio. "It's not just the hypocrisy. It's the way you fooled everyone into thinking you're this authentic, relatable person when you're just another manufactured Hollywood product. At least other celebrities own their phoniness." The cruelty in his words was breathtaking. Even hardened entertainment industry veterans watching at home would later describe this moment as crossing every line of professional courtesy and basic human decency. Lawrence's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of pure, unbridled fury. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. "How absolutely dare you sit there and question my authenticity when you've built your entire career on playing a character? At least I've never pretended to be something I'm not for a paycheck." The audience was now completely divided. Some began to boo, though it was unclear whether they were booing Colbert's behavior or Lawrence's response. Others sat in stunned silence, witnessing what felt like a public execution disguised as entertainment. The energy in the room had become toxic, with an undercurrent of violence that nobody knew how to diffuse. Colbert slammed his hand on his desk, the sharp crack echoing through the studio like a gunshot. "Don't you dare lecture me about authenticity. I've been doing this for decades while you stumbled into stardom by falling down at an awards show. Everything about you is calculated, from your quirky personality to your carefully curated social media presence." "You're absolutely pathetic," Lawrence shot back, her voice now steady and cold as ice. "You're so desperate for relevance that you'll destroy a guest on your own show just to create a viral moment. This isn't journalism, Stephen. This isn't even entertainment. This is just sad." The words hit Colbert like physical blows. His face contorted with rage as he realized that Lawrence had turned the tables on him, exposing his desperation in front of his own audience. The power dynamic had shifted, and now he was the one being torn apart. "Get out!" he hissed, pointing toward the exit. "Get out of my studio right now!" "Gladly," Lawrence replied, her dignity intact despite the ambush. "But first, let me say something to your audience." She turned to face the cameras directly, bypassing Colbert entirely. "This is what happens when someone in power thinks they can bully and humiliate another person for entertainment. This isn't okay, and you all deserve better than this." The studio erupted into chaos. Half the audience was now on their feet, some applauding Lawrence's courage, while others seemed confused about what they had just witnessed. Production assistants were frantically gesturing for cameras to cut away, but the damage was already done. Colbert stood up behind his desk, his face purple with rage and embarrassment. "Security!" he screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Get her out of here now!" But Lawrence wasn't intimidated. She had found her footing in this nightmare scenario and was determined to leave on her own terms. As security guards approached, hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable with the situation they'd been thrust into, she held up her hand to stop them. "I'm leaving," she announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "But not because he told me to. I'm leaving because I have too much respect for myself to stay in a place where I'm not treated with basic human dignity." The confrontation had reached its boiling point, but somehow Lawrence had managed to seize control of the narrative. What happened in those final moments would become the defining image of this entire debacle. As Lawrence began to walk toward the exit, Colbert's desperation reached new heights. Unable to accept that his ambush had backfired so spectacularly, he made one final, catastrophic attempt to regain control of the situation. "Running away, Jennifer? Just like you ran away from taking responsibility for the hacking scandal? Just like you run away from everything that doesn't fit your perfect image?" The reference to one of the most traumatic experiences of Lawrence's career, the violation of her privacy through leaked personal photos, was the final straw. The entire studio gasped in horror at the sheer cruelty of the attack. Even Colbert's most loyal staff members could be seen shaking their heads in disgust at their boss's behavior. Lawrence stopped dead in her tracks, her entire body trembling with a combination of rage and heartbreak. When she turned around, her eyes blazed with a fury that could have melted steel. "You just crossed a line that can never be uncrossed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of absolute moral authority. "That was a violation that nearly destroyed my life, and you just weaponized it for your pathetic little show. You're not a comedian, Stephen. You're not a journalist. You're a bully who hides behind a desk and thinks that gives you the right to destroy people for entertainment." The audience was now completely on Lawrence's side. What had started as confusion had crystallized into clear moral outrage at what they were witnessing. Several audience members could be seen getting up and walking out, refusing to be complicit in what had become a public crucifixion. Colbert, realizing too late that he had gone too far, tried to backtrack. "Jennifer, I was just—" "No," Lawrence cut him off, her voice now strong and unwavering. "You don't get to explain this away. You don't get to pretend this was just television. You deliberately tried to humiliate and hurt another human being, and you did it in front of millions of people." She took a step closer to his desk, and, for a moment, Colbert actually looked afraid. "You want to know what authenticity looks like, Stephen? It looks like standing up to people like you. It looks like refusing to let someone tear you down just because they have a platform and a microphone." The studio was now in complete chaos. Production assistants were running around frantically, trying to figure out how to handle a situation that had spiraled completely out of control. The band sat in stunned silence, their instruments forgotten as they watched their usually composed workplace transform into a battleground. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lawrence addressed the audience one final time, ignoring Colbert completely. "You deserve entertainment that lifts you up, not programming that tears people down. You deserve hosts who treat their guests with respect, not someone who thinks cruelty is comedy. She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering what would become the most quoted line of the entire incident. And Stephen, you should be ashamed of yourself. Not as a host, not as a comedian, but as a human being. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the usually supportive audience couldn't find it in themselves to applaud or respond. They had just witnessed something that felt less like entertainment and more like a public breakdown of basic human decency. Colbert sat behind his desk, his face ashen as the full weight of what he had done began to sink in. His trademark confidence had evaporated, replaced by the hollow stare of someone who had just realized they had destroyed their own reputation. In real time, the man who had built his career on holding others accountable had just been held accountable himself, and he had been found wanting. But Lawrence wasn't finished. Her final act of defiance would cement this moment as one of the most powerful exits in television history. With the poise of someone who had found her strength in the darkest moment, Lawrence walked back toward Colbert's desk. Not to continue the fight, but to deliver a final statement that would resonate far beyond the walls of the Ed Sullivan Theater. She looked directly into the main camera, speaking not to Colbert, but to the millions watching at home. To everyone watching right now, I want you to remember this moment. Remember what it looks like when someone with power thinks they can destroy another person just because they can. Remember what it sounds like when cruelty masquerades as entertainment. And remember that you have the power to say this isn't okay. Her voice was steady now, filled with the quiet authority that comes from moral clarity. No one deserves to be treated the way I was treated tonight. Not celebrities, not ordinary people, not anyone. We can do better than this. We have to do better than this. The audience began to applaud, slowly at first, then building into thunderous approval. They were witnessing something unprecedented. A guest taking control of a show and using it to deliver a message about basic human dignity. Even some of the production crew could be seen nodding in agreement, their usual professional neutrality abandoned in the face of what they had witnessed. Colbert tried one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Jennifer, please, let's just—" "No, Stephen," she interrupted, finally addressing him directly. "You had your chance to be decent, and you chose cruelty instead. You had the opportunity to have a real conversation, and you chose ambush journalism. You had the chance to be a professional, and you chose to be a bully." She gathered her purse and walked toward the exit with the dignity of someone who had not only survived an attack, but had emerged stronger from it. At the edge of the stage, she turned back one final time. "To your audience, who deserves so much better than what they witnessed tonight, thank you for your support. To your staff, who I can see are as horrified by this as I am, I'm sorry you had to witness your workplace become a place of cruelty. And to you, Stephen, I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, because clearly, it isn't here." With that, Jennifer Lawrence walked off the stage and out of the studio, leaving behind a scene of absolute devastation. The audience continued their applause until she disappeared, then slowly began to file out themselves, many shaking their heads in disgust at what they had witnessed. Colbert sat alone at his desk, the weight of his actions finally sinking in. His show, which had been built on wit and intelligence, had devolved into something ugly and cruel. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of his stunned silence, as he realized that his career might never recover from what had just transpired. In the hours that followed, social media exploded with support for Lawrence and condemnation for Colbert's behavior. The hashtag #RespectJennifer began, trending worldwide within minutes, while clips of her powerful exit speech were viewed millions of times. Entertainment industry professionals, fellow celebrities, and ordinary viewers all united in their outrage at what they had witnessed. The ratings for the show plummeted in the following weeks as viewers abandoned a program that had betrayed their trust. Advertisers began pulling their sponsorships, unwilling to be associated with the toxic behavior that had been displayed. Even longtime fans of Colbert expressed their disappointment and disgust at seeing their former hero revealed as someone capable of such cruelty. But perhaps most importantly, Lawrence's brave stand sparked a broader conversation about respect and professionalism in the entertainment industry. Her refusal to be victimized, her grace under pressure, and her powerful message about human dignity resonated far beyond the world of late-night television. What was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance had instead become a watershed moment. A reminder that even in the world of entertainment, basic human decency must never be negotiable. Jennifer Lawrence had walked into that studio as a guest, but she left as a symbol of strength, dignity, and the power of standing up to bullies, no matter how big their platform might be.